I've had a go at modelling Roland's famous TB-303 bassline synthesizer, the acid machine, in Ableton Live using the analog synthesizer. Let's just have a listen to the sound, and then I'll explain how I made it. One of the problems I had was that I don't actually own a 303 or any of the subsequent releases or reboots of the instrument. Thankfully, there's a lot of information on the web available. One video by Loopop, which I'll link below, where he compares I think the Behringer TD3 and the original 303 and makes some comparisons, and he does various sort of filter sweeps and resonance sweeps, etc. So I could use that as something as a reference. But the most important thing I thought was, and I'm going to open up the mapping here for the macros. We have analog in here and some other effects. But one of the most important things I considered when doing the modeling was things like the range of the cutoff. So you can see here, and what I'll do is I'll make screenshots of all the settings, because there's quite a lot of settings in this build. So I'll make screenshots and attach them to the end of the video, so you can simply go through the video, pause the video, and make the settings in your version of Ableton yourself. But I just wanted to explain my approach to the modeling. As I say, if we look at the cutoff here, we only have a range of 821 hertz up to 1.4K. That was the frequency range, and I did a bit of digging around. I found these values. This one I'm not so sure about. This one was there's a website which I'll also link below. I believe his name was Tim, who did a breakdown of the filter of the TB-303, and he said this was hard set at 821 hertz. And then I've kind of played around, as I say, with the videos from Loopop and try to get a feeling. So another thing Loopop said was that the filter never actually closes, and you can see that it goes down to 821 hertz, and that's it. It always remains a little bit open. So I use these kind of ideas. I played around a lot with the resonance. One of the problems with the resonance and the filter in analog, let's turn this off, the mapping here, the TB-303 uses, I believe, a low pass 24 decibel filter, and the problem with the filter in analog is as you increase the resonance, the bass drops away. So I had to compensate for this. I found that the 12 decibel filter didn't have as much bass drop off, and what I did to compensate that, just some insight into the modeling, was here we have the resonance. I actually, on this one, this is important, on this macro it controls two functions. It controls not only the resonance, which I've not put to 100%. I found that around about 70 was seemed suitable for what I could gather from the videos I've watched. Not 100%. 70 was okay. It was always open a little bit, 5% here, but the most important thing was I attached on this macro here, I also mapped it to the sub oscillator here. Let's have this come out of this again. I mapped that to the sub oscillator in the, where is it? Here, it's here in this section here, sub oscillator here. So that's mapped. So as I increase the resonance, I'm also increasing the sub oscillator to bring back the bass a little bit. So a little bit of a cheat. Anyway, what else was important here? There's something here with the oscillator shape. The TB-303 only has a square and a saw wave. Unfortunately, here, if we look at this here, this is oscillator type. We'll have a look up here. Oscillator shape here. There's no way to limit that. I wasn't able to limit it to sine, or just those two wave shapes. As we move this, I can go all the way down to a sine, or I can go to a random wave. There's no way to limit that. You can't restrict it here in the settings, which was unfortunate. So to solve that, what I did was created basically a square which was set to 69, a variant that was always set to 69, and a saw variant which was set to 58. So I switch between those two, I get a saw or a square. That was my solution to that problem. The delay as well, I tried to model on what people use. I've heard 200, 250 milliseconds. I've added a reverb. Let's just have a look. Saturation, of course, we have this, close this a second here. We have a saturator built in, which you can adjust from here. You can adjust the drive and you can compensate with the volume here. The saturation type we can go through here. So the macros allow you to control the instrument. You don't even have to go into this. Okay, I think that's enough of the explanation. What I'll do is I'll build the instrument from the beginning again. And as I say, if you're not interested in watching the entire build, the information I've just given you about the double mapping on the resonance here, on this macro here, that's important. And about the sub bass. If you don't want to go through the entire build, then I'll leave the screenshots at the end for a few seconds. You can pause the video and just have a look at them. I think that's the easiest way. So let's get on with the build. So for the sake of brevity, I've kept the original instrument rack here. You can find your instrument rack in your instruments, you just drag one in. I've kept it simply because it's got all the names for the macros, and I thought it would speed things up, you not having to watch me type in names. So first thing we need then is analog. Let's just drop that in there. And I think this can go quite quickly. I don't want to... Let's mute that. We don't need that playing. We have analog. What else did we have? We had a delay and a reverb. So let's put those in here. Get everything in. Delay. Drop that on the back. Reverb. I believe you need at least standard in there. Standard for this build. I don't believe analog is in the intro version. Close this up. We also had the saturator, I believe. Let's get one of those. Saturator here, which also just goes before the delay and after analog. So we'll come to that in a second. Now, you may have noticed I had an expression control here. There's a MIDI effect, which I'll come to later on. It was an attempt to... The one thing I don't have here is the accent on the original TB-303. It's quite difficult to reproduce here, but I had a little go, and I'll come into that a little bit later. So I think the easiest thing to do is go through the main settings. We have glide on here, and I had glide set to about 40% and legato activated. What else did we have? The most important thing is we have to set this, the TB-303 was a mono synth, so we have to set the voices to mono here. The oscillators to begin with. We will map here. Click on the map. We will map the oscillator shape. So we go to the oscillator shape. We map that one up there. I say that one we can't set the limits on it. The next on the oscillator page which we had was the pulse width. So we can map that as well. So we have the pulse width here. And we will map that. I didn't allow a minimum, but I set this to 95. For the simple reason was that I just wanted to give a little bit of variance in the square wave. The pulse width doesn't affect the saw, but it affects the square, and I found you get some nice little tones when you, it's not true to the TB-303, I mean there's a little bit of flexibility here, but that was the setting I made for that there. The next setting we had in the oscillator section, I think that was it on the oscillator. Most of it happens in the filter. Oh, we have the, of course we have the sub oscillator here, so we'll set that on the resonance, which is this mapping here. We'll map that to this, so let's go to the level and map that to our resonance control, and that, as I explained, was the bass compensation which I used. I set that from 0 to 39%, not too much, to help the bass out a little bit. Okay, I think we're all done with the oscillator section. Oh, we need to switch off oscillator 2, that's important. We don't need oscillator 2, so let's come out of there. We don't need oscillator 2, we only need oscillator 1 running. Single oscillator, mono synth. And let's have a look at the filter now. For the filter we have to play around with the decay settings, but that'll all come from the macros, so let's have a look. We need to go to a 12 decibel filter, map that first. We can map the filter first, so we have the filter cutoff here. Let's go back into our mapping. The cutoff we will map, and this one, as I say, had some minimum and maximum values. This one here, it's 1.4K. Checking my notes as I go here. Excuse me if it seems to drift a little bit. That's 1.4. And this one here was the 821 hertz. 821. There we go. So that's the cutoff set. The resonance we also now need to map. So we click on the resonance, map that, and this had a setting of 5%, I left it a little bit open, and 70 at the top. Right, that one's mapped. Now we have the filter envelope and the filter decay. These are the things that give it that quacking sound, the movement of the filter envelope and the decay. Now pull this right down, it doesn't have any sustain, so we need to map here the envelope here, which is set to 4 at the moment. We will map the filter envelope here, and we need to make some settings there. So frequency to envelope, we set this lower value to 1, and the top value here to 4.32. I had that set, and I played around a lot with this to try and fine tune it. So that's the first one there mapped. The next one we have mapped is the decay of the envelope. This value here, we can map that. And the settings I had for the decay rate are 103 milliseconds. 103 and 410. which I achieved by holding the shift key. Now, that effectively then controls this value here, this parameter here. We can actually switch off and you'll see. So that's controlling the decay of the envelope here. It has no sustain. And this one here controls the envelope amount. Okay, so back to the mapping. So that's the instrument set up effectively. So here are the screenshots I promised. There was one section more on the instrument needs setting up, and that is the amp settings. You have to set the decay to 410, sustain to 0, and the release to 206. A little bit of attack, 7 milliseconds. So I'll now put up the rest of the screenshots for you to use if you didn't want to watch the building of the instrument. If anybody's interested, I'll now connect as well the effects to this rack. So let's set up the rest. Let's set up the saturator. On the saturator, I had the drive and the type. So let's map those. The drive we will map here, and this goes quite quickly now. And the type is here, this box. We click that, map that, we come out of there. Again, we can see we can now change the type of saturator. We can change the level. Okay. Then we have the delay we can set up. Now I took it out of, in the delay I took it out of sync. I thought it was a little bit more authentic to the time when people just would dial in their delay settings. And so we have here, we have the delay rate. Let's close up analog so we can see what's going on. So we have the rate, let's set that up. Map that. Now we can adjust our delay rate. Now this has a range, so we'll go and have a look at that, set that up. And the delay range, the rate I chose was 50 milliseconds. Might be able to type this one in, some you can, yes, to 250 milliseconds. Right, so that one's set up. Next is our delay feedback here. Our delay dry wet. This one's set there, that's correct. Oh, of course we have the ability to make it stereo with the ping pong. We can select that box and map the ping pong as well. That just simply turns on and off. You can see ping pong on, ping pong off. And let's go to our reverb quickly. Set up the reverb. 3 settings for the reverb. Close that. Close that. We have the reverb size, which is here. Map that. The reverb decay. The reverb dry wet. And the last setting was actually an analog setting. That's the volume of analog here, so that we have a chance to control the volume of the instrument if we start adding saturation. And that had a setting as well, I believe. 6 decibel, that's all right, it's already dialed in. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. So let's just have a look. I think we're good now. Everything's working. Bring back the sound again. Might want to have a slightly. Oh, on our delay, there's one thing we do need to set. We need to set the. Can we set that here? Dry wet. Oh, we can do it here. Okay. 100 we can set. Okay. So let's turn that off. Turn down the reverb level. And there we go. Got ping pong. And a reverb. Right, so switches off for a second. The final thing we have left is the expression control. And this was just an experiment, really. And what you can do with expression control is you can select a source, in this case velocity, and let me just open up here. So we have our note, we have a velocity value. These are set to 100. That's what happens when you use the pen and put them in. They're set to 100. And so we can set the velocity, and what we can do is we can choose a target for what the velocity affects. And in my case I used the filter frequency here, but I couldn't map it here, but I can map it to this control here on the macro. And now I can change this from unipolar, but I want it at unipolar, I would keep it at unipolar, and I can then have a value which I believe I played around with 10%. So velocity will now affect cutoff. Here you can see that a little bit has been added. If I increase that, you can increase this range on the TB-303, which effective, from what I understand, opened the filter, opened the resonance, and affected the decay envelope on the filter. It had multiple functions. I could put 3 expression controls in and build something very complicated, but I just wanted something simple. So what I thought was, well, with the volume I get an increase in volume. So if I increase this to 127, and if I restrict by pulling here, this filter here, you will see that only the 100 notes are bouncing here below the filter. They're filtered out. They're not affecting this. Now we need to chop that down a little bit. Move that back to 10. You can see it's moving here, but they're not being affected by that. They're being affected by this one value that comes through. Actually, you do get a couple. You get 127 and 126, these values here. But if I reduce that, you will see that I'm not getting any values here. I'm not getting any modulation here. So the long and the short of it was, I've attempted by using the velocity here, not only to increase volume, but to open the filter. So let's have a listen to that, see if we can hear that. See if you can hear that. Not opening the filter. So my attempt was then, if I wanted to have some kind of accent in the sequence I've programmed, I would just set some notes to 127, which would allow for this function to work. You could expand this, you could put another expression control, and I think make the target the resonance, and then you'd also get some resonance there. Anyway, that's the instrument setup. It's not too difficult. Really, it's just, as I say, a case of these settings. Let's just close that down. It's really a case of the settings here that I spent some time trying to optimize. Yeah, I don't know if they're ideal. I just thought it sounded quite nice. It's an instrument that you can play around with. I've just sat and tweaked it for hours. Anyway, as always, I hope this is of some use to somebody. Someone can make use of it and have some fun. Maybe I'll play a little bit of the tune to it on the way out, and you can stop and pause, take the settings, set up your own instrument. Oh yeah, one final thing. If you don't know that already, you can click here now, and this will allow you to save this entire build. Close it up. I like to keep it like that. You can now save this entire build here. Save it again. There we go. Overwrite, okay. And that you can then drag, you can use it on the push 2, push 3, whatever. These aren't external instruments, they're all compatible with Ableton. You can get in there with your push and tweak around. Okay, but anyway, thank you for coming by.